What is the future of the AFL academies and will it affect Essendon? There's been a lot of talk in AFL circles regarding future unfairness regarding the academies, and we're going to talk about that right now in this video.
Passion and the iron will. No one doubts the courage of the boys from Windy Hill. They may try.
So there was a footy bosses meeting last Monday, and Cal Toomey was reporting that after the meeting, the sense was that the AFL may bring in a protected zone for the draft as soon as 2026. Now, protected zone, this means that certain draft picks are protected and cannot be pinched by other clubs like we've seen with father-son picks and academy picks, and everything would be on the table. Top 5 picks, top 10 picks, first round picks. There would be a lot of criticism from some clubs because of the self-interest involved, and that they would argue that if they have academy players, they've nurtured those players, and they should be able to therefore have access to those players. The other side of the coin for that, of course, is that it creates an inequality in the league, and the whole point of the league, what they've been trying to do since about 1986 anyway, is create an equalised system where all the clubs, at least in theory, have a similar chance of winning the premiership, and this has not been the case in recent years, particularly with the Northern Academies seen to be being more advantageous than the others. So why is this going to affect Essendon? Well, it could affect Essendon because if this comes in, someone like Koby Bewick, who is going to be a 2027 draftee and is talked about potentially as being a top 5 pick. I mean, a lot can happen between now and then. Obviously, it's a couple of years away. He's still very young. But if he was a top 5 pick, there was every chance that Essendon would therefore not be able to pick him. Carlton's got a good one coming through, a father-son pick in Cody Walker, who is due to play for the Blues, or due to be selected in next year's draft, the 2026 draft. And if he was going to be a really, really top pick, as they expect, they may lose access to this. So I actually don't necessarily disagree in principle with this, even though there could be some potential short-term ramifications for Essendon in not being able to pick up a good player. I think the Northern Academies have been too much of an advantage to the Northern clubs. I'm all for growing the game up there. I think it's an important thing that, you know, you create pathways for young players to play the game up there. But the difference with the Northern Academies, as opposed to the academies that we use here at Essendon, where we're going to pick up Adam Swade and Hussein Al-Achkar, we got Jaden Nguyen, I mean, players from sort of what you'd call multicultural backgrounds, right? The difference with the Northern Academies is that it's not multicultural backgrounds, it's pretty much just access to anybody up there because they're not AFL states. So anybody that, can join the academy, it doesn't matter what their background is. They could be a former rugby league player. They could be anywhere, as long as they're from New South Wales or Queensland. So Tom Green, for example, one of the best players in the AFL, plays for GWS, came from their academy up there. Now, he's obviously as an Australian background as you can get. And there's obviously lots of other examples up there with those players, and a lot of the players that the 4 New South Wales and Queensland clubs, a lot of the players they have access to. So St Kilda is one of the clubs that hasn't really benefited from father-sons or perhaps NGAs as much as others, and they've tabled a plan to the AFL Commission. So what the Saints have done, they've said that the abolition of the Northern Academy zones ahead of the upcoming draft, the inclusion of Queensland, New South Wales and the ACT in the redistribution of normal NGA zones, like we have in Victoria, like Essendon has their zone, North Melbourne has a zone, Hawthorn, everyone has their zone, but it wouldn't actually be the Northern Academy as it currently works. Clubs would only be able to match 1 bid in each draft on any academy or father-son pick. Clubs that finish in the top 4 be blocked from matching a bid on an academy or father-son pick in the first round of that year's draft. So if the Brisbane Lions, for example, won this year's premiership, obviously a top 4 pick, they would be blocked for matching a bid on Dan Annaball. For example, if it was in place this year, Dan Annaball is expected to be maybe the 2nd pick in the draft. He's a top 3 pick. He's going to go to Brisbane via the academy. And this is a perceived unfair. This is part of how you weigh up the positives and the negatives. Should we have access to someone like Koby Bewick, who we think might be a top 5 player in a couple of years' time? Or should we be able to have access to every other player, including players who we can't access at the moment because they're tied up with other academies? And father-sons. Koby Bewick, of course, is potentially linked to Essendon via the father-son rule. So that is the thing. So I actually am not totally against this idea. I think the Saints are probably acting in a little bit of self-interest, and that's fine. If you don't look after yourself, no one else is going to. So, of course, you're going to be asking and looking for things that are going to help your club. Well, why wouldn't you? I mean, no one's going to stick up for you unless you stick up for yourself. So I'm not actually against the Saints doing this. And I actually think that the academies have probably gone a little bit too far. You look at it at the moment, and we've got a case where the Gold Coast Suns are going to get 2 picks in the top 5, and you're going to get the Brisbane Lions, who may win the premiership, have a pick in the top 2 or 3. And there's a perceived unfairness with that. Now, those that are arguing for it would say, well, yeah, there's a bidding process and there's a point system in place. But I think, in my opinion anyway, clubs manipulate these point systems. They know that they're going to get these picks in advance, so they accumulate some lower picks in previous rounds that they can then use to accumulate the points. I mean, they do whatever they can to sort of game the system. That's not a criticism of them. If you were them, you would probably game the system as well. Who wouldn't? That's just a normal thing that you would do if you're going to benefit from something. But certainly it does seem a little bit unfair, and it does seem like the northern clubs get proportionately advantaged with this, more so than the clubs with the regular, what you call multicultural NGA academies like we do down here. If you like the content I provide, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. I hit over 2,000 subscribers last week. That's absolutely fantastic, and I'd like to keep it going. So if you like the content, please hit the like and subscribe buttons right now. I think going forward, perhaps the way to solve this issue in a fair way would be to make the necessary changes that are mooted, but wait until after Tasmania come into the competition, because there are clubs who have altered their draft hand and have made preparations based on these players coming into the system. So it would be unfair to disadvantage those clubs, but anything outside of 2027, the clubs wouldn't have made the necessary preparations yet, so it wouldn't disadvantage them. I think that's probably the way to solve this going forward. So my question to the people in the chat is, if you take your Essendon hat off for a second and you look at this objectively, what would you prefer? Would you prefer Essendon to have access to Koby Bewick, but for all the draft and NGA advantages that exist to remain as they are, so you have certain clubs being more advantaged than others? Or would you rather not have access to him, but have a totally uncompromised draft where Essendon and every other club has potential access, depending on how the draft is structured, to potentially every player that exists in the pool, whether they're from an NGA from another club or not? That really is the question. Now, the Koby Bewick situation is a little bit different because he's a potential father-son, not an academy player. And under the mooted rules, if you're a top 4 pick and you're excluded from matching bids on father-sons and academy players, well, we're unlikely to be a top 4 team. So that's probably not an issue. But if you could only match one bid in each draft on an academy or father-son pick, that could potentially influence it, because we don't know, other academy players could come along who are really, really good, who we want to match, who we want to prioritise. You just don't know what it's going to look like in a couple of years. So even though he is a father-son, not an academy, it could still have an effect, and it's only a matter of time before people arc up even more about the father-son rule and seek to limit it even further. So if the system was in place this year, Essendon and every other club would be able to access one of the 2 players that the Gold Coast Suns have got under their Northern Academy. They've got Dylan Patterson and Zeke Hewland, who are both considered to be 2 top 5 picks. But under the submission from St Kilda, only one of those would be able to have a bid matched on them, and the other one would be up for grabs. So the Gold Coast Suns, who didn't finish top 4 last year, obviously would only have one of those. The Brisbane Lions would not have access to Dan Annable, who is expected to be number 2 pick, because they finished top 4 last year. And under the Saints submission, any club that finishes top 4 will be blocked from matching a bid on an academy or father-son pick in the first round of the draft. So I'm not against this idea. It's difficult when your club might be advantaged in some way with a potential good player coming through, but I'm just looking at the bigger picture of this. I think it's ridiculous that we, Essendon, are going to have pick 4 in the draft this year, but it's actually probably going to turn into pick 8 or something like that, which it just doesn't seem right. And I think something needs to be done. Does that mean we end up losing Koby Bewick in 2027? Well, it might, and that might be difficult. It might be a bitter pill for some people to swallow, but there might also be a lot of other advantages that go along with that we also need to acknowledge that we and other clubs can benefit from. So I'm going to leave it there. I thought this would be an interesting video. What do you guys think? I think this is going to be a very divisive topic. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Have a great day, everybody. And as always, go Bombers.